10 was murdered by Chikatilo and not found for 66 days. August 1989, Yelena Varga, 19, was found murdered in some abandoned woods. August 29, 1989. He seems to be really active in August, I've noticed. Alyosha Kobatov, 10, Chikatilo hit him over the head, bit off his tongue, and cut off his sexual organs. He then threw his body into a pit, covered it with dirt. Fucking Jesus. January 14, 1990, Kravchenko, 11, was found stabbed to death and his genitals were cut off. March 7, 1990, Yaroslav Makarov, 10, Chikatilo jumped on the boy and began to assault him by an attempt to have oral sex with the boy. It ended in an orgy of hacking and stabbing, and Chikatilo cut off the tip of the boy's tongue and genitals. Both were tossed into the gardens. April 4th, 1990, Lyubov Zuyeva, a mentally retarded woman who Chikatilo had met on the train, he murdered her in the woods, and she was not found until her body was almost completely decomposed. July 1990, Vitya Petrov, 13, Chikatilo killed the boy once he got him to a deserted spot. August 14, 1990, Ivan Fomin, 11, was found slaughtered on a river beach. He had 45 different knife wounds. God damn. Okay. October 17, 1990, Vadim Gromov, 16, a mentally handicapped from birth. He was persuaded to follow Chikatilo into the woods, and then Chikatilo pinned him and began to sexually molest him. Tied the boy's hands and bit off the tip of the boy's tongue, and then began to strike him in the head and stomach with his knife. After he had died, Chikatilo cut off his genitals and tossed them away into the undergrowth. November 3rd, 1990, Vitya Tashiko, 16, was persuaded to leave a train station with Chikatilo and then found stabbed to death only a short distance from the station. This is the one time that he wasn't being patrolled or watched. Svetlana Korostik, 22, officers found the naked, this is November 13, 1990, officers found the naked remains of a young blonde woman half buried under a pile of leaves. She was horribly mutilated and had multiple knife wounds to the vital organs, including stabbing of the stomach and amputation of the genitals and tongue. That same month, November 29, 1990, Chikatilo admitted for the first time to authorities that he had killed. And January 18, 1991, Chikatilo described the various methods he used to pick up his victims. Summer 91, investigators had almost completed their case against Chikatilo. They believed that they had a clear and conclusive case of 53 killings. August 1991, Chikatilo was taken to experts at Moscow's Serbsky Psychiatric Institute to undergo a detailed analysis of whether or not he was insane. The doctor's final conclusion was clear and unequivocal. If sanity is the ability to be in control of one's own actions, then Chikatilo was undoubtedly sane. The trial began April 14, 1992, and on October 15, 1992, Chikatilo was found guilty of 52 counts of murder the day before his birthday. And then on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1994, Chikatilo dies by firing squad, gunshot to the back of the head. Okay, now I'm exhausted because that was a lot of fucking murders to talk about. Jesus fucking Christ. What a sicko. Yeah. Who wants to talk? I need a break.
Well, it's an interesting thing. You were talking about how the authorities really weren't tracking it. I mean, it was like early on in the early 80s, they weren't tracking it all. And then it became pretty big news later on. And then they actually started to take an approach and they started to film. I think it was like in the early 90s or something like that. I think that they actually had people with cameras filming railway stations to investigate that way. And you think that's odd. I just think that's odd because I have this different perspective of the Soviet Union where you just go up and you just start grabbing people and then questioning them, as opposed to something a little bit more surveillance oriented. But that's actually how they did it. When they caught him, they were at he came in and there was an officer that noticed him come back from the woods and he went over and he was cleaning himself and he noticed that. We thought that was odd and so it was again just investigated policing. But I just figured it'd be a little bit more heavy-handed in Soviet Union. rather than.
Good point. Very true.
But yeah.
I was gonna say, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the timeline, it's insane to me because there was hot spots. I don't want to call them, but there were hot spots where you could find them. I mean, he was staying in a general area. You would think if you're going to be picking up bodies and picking up mutilated bodies, you know somebody's doing it. You're going to put a little bit more surveillance there to catch him. But it took how long? I mean, this is a long time, a long span of time that he was in a relatively small geographic area, right? I mean,
yeah.
And he was going after.
And there was not large breaks in between either.
Right. I mean, he was on sprees, and these were and the age brackets of the victims were fairly predictable. They were young. They weren't. There was a couple ones in their 20s, but for the most part, they were young kids. I mean, you would think that's where you're going to be looking. You're going to be looking for some person that's going to be going after young kids. But I just can't fathom how come they weren't able to get them a little bit earlier and figure that out. But like you said, the Soviet Union had a different perspective. They didn't really acknowledge that it was a serial killer for a while yet, and they wouldn't publicly acknowledge it for a while yet.
Yeah. By the way, I mentioned something earlier whenever I was talking about how his blood type didn't match his semen. His blood type was type A, but his sperm was type AB. And this was a 1 in a million chance. And again, they weren't familiar with this issue back then, so yeah. A little piece thrown in there.
Wasn't he also?
Yeah.
Was it? Did they use DNA testing back then? I think that they did, right?
I know they could blood type. I'm not sure how much they could do that, but yeah, I'm not. I'll be lying if I said I knew for sure. I don't remember that portion of it. I just remember the whole blood typing thing.
I remember the blood typing thing and the fact that his semen was AB, which is really kind of weird.
It really is because it just sounds like, it's pretty obvious he's their guy. And one of these detectives, whenever the blood type didn't match, he said he just fucking checked out on the whole thing because he was sure that it was Chikatilo. And then the blood type doesn't match, and you're like, fuck. And, you're chasing this guy who's doing these horrific crimes. And make no mistake, these are horrific. Cutting out people's uterus, fucking nuts, dick. I mean, all these things. It's just horrible.
And eating it, right? So he's also eating it. I mean, he had everything.
He claims he was chewing them, not eating them. That's what his claim was. They were chewy. He liked to chew them, but he didn't eat them. He wasn't a cannibal. So, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I guess you have to get into the definition of what eating is. Maybe he didn't digest them, but he certainly, yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, Johnny Bartlett and Frankers called him that Russian cannibal creep.
Right. I mean, well, because, I don't know, when you start chewing on them, I would think that would be part of it.
Yeah, chewing is a gateway to eating, is it not? I'm sure.
Unless it's gum.
He did. I mean, there was a couple quotes of his that he sort of understood that he was a nut. Like, the big quote was, that I was a mistake of nature, a mad beast, right? So he sort of understood that he understood that he was he couldn't control himself, and that he was completely crazy.
Oh yeah. He even said, what I did was not for sexual pleasure, rather it brought me some peace of mind. It's like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, he actually was more specific. There's a quote about using a knife, and it was, when I used my knife, it brought psychological relief. I know I have to be destroyed. I'm a mistake of nature. Like, he really was a little bit more, I don't know, inward thinking, I guess.
He made another quote like that, similar to it. He said, I'm a mistake of nature, a mad beast. Yep. I'd say it's about right anyway. Just a sick guy. Blake, I don't know, give us some fucking perspective on this thing.
Well, his thirst for blood was insatiable. His hunger for power was just as insatiable as that. And while he was in the constant pursuit of both, he decided to go ahead and just let all the rest of his inhibitions flow, because we have girls, we have men, we have boys, we have chewing, we have eating, we have murder, we have overkill. I mean, stabbing in the mouth. I mean, just that by itself yields the question of exactly why. Do you do something like that? And he is probably one of the most, I don't want to say prolific, because it's probably not an accurate enough word. What he is he's known in a lot of circles, but a lot of people, when they think they're typical serial killers, they don't include him in the mix. But out of many of them, he was probably one of the more prolific. I mean, I would put him up there with, as a contemporary, maybe in a less kind of way, Gary Leon Ridgway. I mean, as far as just sheer number of victims. I mean, because honestly, if they find a dead prostitute or a hooker washed up near Seattle or the Green River, they don't even bother investigating. They just blame it on Ridgway. I mean, basically, hell, who knows how many he really killed. I've heard it's been as most as 180. I've heard him say it's been in between 40 to like 50 something. Who the hell really knows? And I mean, honestly, how many people do we really know how many victims did Chikatilo really have? That's just the ones that are documented. I think there are probably more bodies buried someplace that they didn't find from way sooner, because it just seems to me the psychosis and all the problems that he had would have sort of stimulated that part of his brain at a much younger age, because we're talking 1973. Or at 78, the first time that he killed someone, 78, he would have been, 42 by then? Or thereabouts? I mean, so I think that probably there are more people out there, that he probably did kill. We just don't know who they are. But out of all of them, I mean, he definitely is one of the ones that takes the most insane, creepy, just horrifying pictures. Like, there's a picture of him laughing inside this fucking cage that they have him in, because they treat him like he's an animal. And he's just like laughing, like this toothless kind of like grin with the little crow's feet at the sides of his eyes. And I'm sitting there thinking, how in the world do you fucking sit in that spot where you're at right now and smile about anything? Like, how many mothers and fathers' hearts did you break when they had to bury their babies?
Yeah.
I mean, he was
awful.
Right? You mentioned about the cage.
What's that?
They put him in the cage,
yeah,
right, when they prosecuted him. Yeah. And it was rather swift justice for him, right? I mean, he was convicted and then executed within 2 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on Valentine's Day, on the day you're supposed to love, on the day that's historically a love day, Valentine's Day, let's kill this motherfucker, that's what they did, and to go by firing squad. I mean, Jesus. Again, I said something about that earlier. His entire life was lived at the edge of oblivion, basically. I mean, just chaotic, no real rhyme or reason, no discrepancy or fear of what would happen to himself. He lived every day like it was going to be his last. And to paraphrase, what was it, Starkweather or Richard Speck rather? He felt like he was born to raise hell, and I think that's what he did, and he was very good at that, because he lived by the sword, and sort of died sort of by the sword, in that same kind of manner. Very violent, grotesque, morbid death, fitting for someone that did what he did. But he will forever be known as the Rostov Ripper, and Russia will never forget Chikatilo. They haven't. I mean, there are still people, that shudder at the mere mention of his name, because look at what he did. I mean, this was a guy that was around your kids in school. This is a guy that was, answer a telephone, a telephone operator, a guy who did this and that. And he it's almost like Dennis Rader. It's this guy put security in your home. This guy, you knew this guy, you saw this guy every day, and just think about when you saw him. Did he just kill somebody? And when you were looking at him, had he just killed some girl or some boy, or both?